Hey everyone, welcome back to week 5 of Striper Season Updates with On the Water. I'm Matt Haeffner, and over the next 2 months, we'll be bouncing around the Striper Coast following different local bites as bass migrate north. We'll talk to all sorts of credible striper fishing sources from Jersey to Maine to give you the scoop on how the bite changes over the course of the migration. Last week, I was joined by Kevin Ryan, a kayak angler and custom jig pourer from the New York City area who loves to target 20-plus pound stripers from the seat of his kayak. Kevin and I talked about the migration gaining steam around the New York-New Jersey bight, with Raritan Bay, New York Bay, and Jamaica Bay yielding a handful of substantial 40-inch catches already this month. The bass are crushing Ben Parker Magnum flutter spoons, metal lip plugs, SP minnows, and the usual suspects for soft plastics. In the eastern Long Island Sound, the bite is picking up as schoolie bass make their way up the East River into the waters around Connecticut and the North Shore of Long Island. Meanwhile, some of the larger fish are sticking around, or at least taking a more leisurely path along Long Island's South Shore. The back bays are alive across much of Long Island now, and with each passing day, the buffet of bait is growing substantially. This week, we're heading out to Long Island's East End to check in with Tim Regan. Tim is the drone pilot and videographer, avid surfcaster and fly angler, and the author of the weekly Long Island Fishing Report here at On the Water. Tim, thanks for joining the show this week, man.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
And Tim, you're getting into holdovers pretty much all winter long in obviously the back bays and salt ponds around you, but what are you seeing around you so far with the hot bite going on out west?
Out east. Out east you're talking about? Or you're talking about the fishing by the city?
Yeah, no, I meant like the hot bite has been going on out west. So like now fish are pushing east. Like what's going on out east? What are you seeing out there?
Way more than I have in years past in April. This April has been kind of an anomaly in regards to the size of the fish that have been showing up this early. Usually April 15th, there's a bunch of holdovers around, and we probably start to see our first wave of migrators. But this year, and usually that first wave is probably 16 to 24 inch fish, the real small ones. But this year, right out of the gates, people were catching slot and over slot fish just in the surf right here, which is even crazier too, because we'll get a first wave to hit the surf, and then most of the rest of the fishing is going to be in the bay. But the surf has been holding really strong lately, which is great for me. I'm right on the ocean, and it's my favorite place to fish. But I've actually done more catching in the bays lately.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's funny you say that there's fish in the surf already. That seems to kind of be a trend across the coast because I was talking to Stavros Viglas, who is actually a captain out on Martha's Vineyard. He's a great guy, works with On the Water a lot. He was actually wearing the same hat as you in the video.
I saw. Yeah, he inspired me.
And no, so he's been fishing out in the surf, and he was like, usually we get the migratory fish right around the salt ponds. They move into the salt ponds with the tide and kind of crush on bait on top water. But he's been finding fish in the surf on bucktails and stuff. And yeah, like you said, 16 to 20, I would say not even 24 inches, 16 to 20 inches. And they're tiny fish, but they're moving fast and they're, real close to shore. They're hugging that shoreline. So what have you been throwing, close to the shoreline in order to get onto those fish early in the season?
Mostly in the beginning of the season, my favorite things to throw are light tackle stuff. So I'm using the fly gear a lot. And on the days when it's a little bit rougher and I don't want to do all the work of fly fishing, I'm going to whip out some bucktails. I actually got a couple right here. I'll show you. I tie them up myself. Anywhere from like 3/8. Here's a 3/4 ounce one, a little pink on it. Another 3/4 ounce one. It's just bucktail and feathers. And here's a little either 1/2 ounce or 3/8 ounce one. So yeah, little bucktails, and can't go wrong with a little rubber shad either. I think so far this guy has caught. Let me retry that. So far, this guy has caught most of my surf fish and my bay fish too. I had a nice weak fish on this.
Is that the tsunami shad?
I believe so. Give you a little close up on it. Got a little gobbledygook on it. But
So for those bucktails, you throw in white paddle tails, and I saw you had white bucktails as well. So is there a reason that you think that the fish love to hit on white? I know it's maybe got something to do with the herring run, but I think early in the season, white is like the go-to color for much of the coast. Do you know why that might be?
I love white. I think that it's the best color for fishing where we are in the Northeast. It just imitates such a huge variety of species that our predator species like to eat. So, a stunned squid is going to be all white. You got the belly of alewives, belly of bunker. You know, most fish's bellies are going to be white. So besides white, I rarely ever throw dark colors. I'm pretty much throwing white every single time I fish. The only difference is sometimes I'll add a different color to the top. So I lately, starting last year, I've been using yellow a lot, and then even like a little darkness on top to really emulate a fish that has that kind of pattern. Dark back, light bottom. So
100%. And Atlantic silver sides or spearing, whatever you want to call them, are one of those fish too that have that dark back. And then they got that kind of white side, silver side, underbelly. I mean, they're called silver sides. Hell. So there you go.
yeah, this is specifically a silver side bucktail. It's got like a light light yellow green on top and then white on the bottom. And yeah, long and narrow exactly with the feathers facing outward, so it gives a little wiggle action.
Yeah, so some of those jigs that you just pulled up, I also noticed that you have really big eyes on those. Is that something? Is that like a feature you found has been more productive for you? Because I find on some of my lures, at least, the jig heads that have an eye, they seem to really focus in on that or hone in on the fact that there's actually an eye. I don't know why that is.
I don't really subscribe to that. So, like, if it doesn't have an eye, that's not gonna, mess with my psyche at all. I'm still gonna feel just as confident.
I mean, I was gonna say it might add to that realistic, the realistic look we're talking about and looking for.
Totally, and I do think that fish will hone in on an eye, and it could make could make or break a session. It could make the difference between whether you're catching or not. But um, only some of my stuff has eyes on it.
Yeah, and the only reason I ask that is because I've actually noticed in my particular outings, like when I'm freshwater fishing, specifically with smallmouth bass, and I'm not going to go too much into it, but smallmouth bass seem to hone in on the fact that there's an eye painted, whether it's painted or real, on the jig head or on the actual swim bait itself. The swim baits that I used to use had eyes on them a lot of the time. And so that seemed to, I don't know, trigger a bite half the time versus when I was fishing with swim baits or jigs that didn't have an eye. So I don't know. It's just something to think about if you're trying to, match the hatch. Those eyes, especially for tying bucktails, definitely could make a difference.
We'll keep that in the mind.
Do you have any go-to flies? Because you were talking a little bit about the fly rod, and you also have a piece that's going to be coming out in the upcoming issue of On the Water magazine about something you call the breakdance.
Yeah, so the flies that love to use mainly for the breakdance specifically, those are going to be smaller flies for the most part. I got some right here. I'll pull them out. But, a clouser works great for that. That's probably my favorite fly to use for the breakdance. Um, I love using crab flies, but trying to fish a crab fly correctly in the surf is a very difficult thing to do because you have to make them move a certain way and they don't move exactly like fish. So when a wave breaks on your line, that'll make your fly move like a fish. Uh, and if you have a crab fly on, then that's not going to be moving realistically. So this is like a crab fly that I like to use. I make it look like a sand flea, if you can see it. It's got a white bottom, kind of brown, sandy looking top. That's all deer hair. And then it's got some rubber legs and orange deer hair back where the eggs would be. So that's on a small Siwash, and I wrap lead wire around the shank to help get it down because that deer hair likes to float. I've actually been working on different crab flies, especially mole crab imitations this year, uh, to get a better sinking fly. Although this catches like crazy in the surf. That's probably my favorite. My favorite thing to throw is that, and then just an assortment of clousers. I got one here, big old heavy eyes right there. That'll sink and that'll stay down. I like the chartreuse over white. Um, so that's specifically for the surf. Those two. I like to throw this in the flats too, the crab. And flat season's coming up. Once it's early May, I'll start looking towards the flats to find some bass in there because the bluefish will show up eventually and make it harder to target the bass that are there. So if you get there before that, probably catch a lot of bass. So that's what I'm going to be trying, is throwing crab flies on the flats.
You're not the only one who's throwing those sand flea flies or sand fleas or something that imitates them at least. In week 2, we had John Oswald on, who actually wrote a piece in On the Water magazine about fishing with sand fleas as bait down on the Jersey Shore, and how it's become a very popular way to produce fish, even on crowded beaches in the middle of the summer, a hot summer day. When you don't think there's fish out there, they're not further out. They're right up on the shoreline, cruising that shoreline, snacking on all the things that get pushed in along the surf line. So those sand fleas, when they burrow along, like you'll find stripers nosing along in the sand like redfish do a lot of the time. And I think that's really cool, that people have kind of honed in on imitating sand fleas like you have with flies like that.
The stripers love them, and they spend most of their summer swimming along the beach lip looking for those, specifically sand fleas, the mole crabs. So I guide, and whenever I teach like like a rookie kid uh, to fish the surf, we're throwing sand fleas on a circle hook with like a half ounce of weight and just putting that out 10 feet, and those kids are catching a bunch of fish in an hour. It's Fishing with sand fleas is by far the most consistently effective way that I have found to fish the surf.
And so when do you find that those sand fleas typically become like a prominent bait? Like when are they kind of densely populating the area? Because I know they burrow, so they're not around all the time. But when do you kind of see them pop up again in the summer? Is it late June, mid June?
Actually, usually a lot earlier. I always see them in April. Um, my friend Matt Heckman just sent me a picture of one that he picked up from the surf today. So they're out there. I'm not sure if they're really honing in on them. There's a lot of bait passing through right now. There's all sorts of birds out there. There's gannets. I just saw my first tern the other day. Seagulls are attacking the cormorants, stealing the bunker out of their mouths. I got some drone footage of this stuff, so I'll send it over to you. It just seems like there's a huge variety of baits out there right now. So stripers will hone in on sand fleas when there is even like a plethora of other bait around. So even in the summer when the whole beach is just inundated with bunker schools, almost all the stripers are going to be right at your feet feeding on sand fleas. I think it's just an easy method that they have figured out to not expend much energy and get their fill. And so that's what I target, and that keeps my rod bent consistently, like from I would say June, yeah, all through beginning of October, and by that point, I'm already trying to target. I think the stripers have moved on to other species like sand eels, if there's sand eels around, or once the mullets start running through, they'll switch off to them. But sand fleas are always like a good go-to. So if you're not getting bites for a while because the mullet have already passed and you're just waiting for the next bait to arrive, fish some sand fleas on the beach lip and you probably stay bent.
The sand eels won't show up until a little later on, and the mullet run's a little bit brief. That happens more closer to the fall run. But what are you seeing in the surf right now? I mean, you said you're seeing bunker. Has herring been one of the prominent baits around there as well?
I haven't seen any herring.
So mostly, you'd say probably mostly bunker.
Yeah, and maybe there's a lot of weak fish passing through. I don't know if there's juvies. I've been seeing and hearing of bigger weak fish. Um, but besides the bunker, you got to imagine if the turns are out there might be some spearing. I don't really know. I can't say. Spearing is a good bet, though.
I would figure probably spearing. They seem to be the ones that show up almost immediately after the bunker in terms of that small rain bait kind of stuff. So, but that's good. That's good to know. So, how helpful is your drone in studying the movement and feeding patterns of stripers on the east end as the spring progresses into summer and summer into fall? Because I would imagine that those fish patterns, the way they feed, they change.
Yeah. So the best way that I've heard the changing of feeding patterns, was by Craig Cantelmo in a podcast. and he said that in the summer the fish are looking down, and then at some point early in the fall they switch and they start looking up. So, in it to me, that means that they're looking down, looking for the crabs, which like that's what's going on. And then when they switch over and start looking up, I'm guessing it's they're looking for fish at that point. Bigger meal for them.
Yeah, it's that's a great quote from Craig Cantelmo there. Especially, I mean, I never really thought about it that way, but when you simplify it down to that, it really makes sense that early on in the season when they're hugging those muddy bottoms and whatnot, especially in the back days, they're going to be looking for things like crabs and looking down. Whereas later on in the season, those water temperatures change and everything, they're going to be looking up. So I would imagine you've seen a lot of that with your own drone footage as well to reinforce that theory.
Well, no, I figured out that the fish were there. I figured out what they were feeding on. My friend Nico introduced me to the idea of using sand fleas as bait because I was trying to catch fluke one summer, like some summers back. I couldn't catch any, for the life of me. I was fishing the heck out of the gulp and couldn't get much. And then Nico hit me up, and he had just caught two keeper fluke with using sand fleas. So I tried it out, started using sand fleas, started catching the fluke, and started catching other fish. And then over the next couple years, uh, it dawned on me that all the stripers that I was catching, just about all the ones that weren't on structure, I was getting a lot of hits right from the beach lip. I ended up just fishing the heck out of the beach lip, and I got good at that, and I started catching a lot of fish there. And then so the idea was planted in my head that like stripers swim along the beach lip, and then I put my drone on it and got like the evidence to back that up. One day I flew out over all these bunker schools in the summer, and it was like the whole coast, like probably for miles. I couldn't see the end of the schools. I already had it in my mind that all the stripers are on the beach lip, and the bunker schools, they're not getting attacked or anything. You can cast a popper out there, you cast a snag hook and wait, but nothing's going on out there. And then I was like, I bet you I'm going to catch some fish off the beach lip right now. So I went, fished the sand fleas on the beach lip, and caught a few fish. And I was like, all right, launching my drone. Launched the drone, and I just saw dozens of stripers just doing exactly what I say, riding the wave up, riding the wave back. And there were like weren't any near the bunker. So after that, I really started trying to hone that method, down to something that works perfectly.
This early on in the season, are you guys seeing larger migratory bass begin to reach the Hamptons and Montauk in greater numbers, or are you seeing mostly schoolies push there? Because it seems like a lot of those larger fish have tend to hunker down a little bit around the New York City area. But what are you seeing in terms of quality out on the East End right now?
High quality. My friend Orson just caught a 40 pounder earlier this week in the surf. Um, April. Like, you freaking kidding me? Like on the East End, that's ridiculous. And then all those slot fish and upper slots, it's strange. And I kind of have some theories on it. I don't know if they're right. I think that for the past like 4 years there have has been an ever growing holdover population, and I wouldn't be surprised if that 40 held over here for the winter. I hooked a couple fish. I hooked one this winter that I think would have been a pretty nice striper. And I didn't get it in, but I have gotten in a couple 20 plus fish in the past couple years in like February. So that suggests that there are larger fish holding over here. Um, and those fish could have poured out from the bays. And they could be migrators. I don't know, but that's just a thought that's in my head. It's like maybe there are some serious fish holding over here.
And there's a lot of small rivers out on the East End there that contribute to the larger Peconic River and its herring run. So I think maybe that concentration of herring and the fish knowing that they're going to gather there every year. Because if you haven't read it, I also wrote a piece on the herring run and how Long Island doesn't get much of a herring run on the rest of its rivers because of all these dams and stuff we've built over the past 100, 200 years. So I think it's not crazy to think that the fish have kind of hunkered down there over the winter in the areas around Peconic Bay and those back bays and salt ponds to really hone in on that herring run when it does happen, because it happens relatively early in the season, mid to late April. So it's totally reasonable to think that, and that reflects as well with guys like Stavros up on Martha's Vineyard catching 20 to 25 pound holdovers in their salt ponds. So and he's even heard rumblings that not all those fish stay in the pond; they move out into the surf. So it's totally possible. I would just love to know what those fish are feeding on, and if they are hunkered down for the entire year in one spot.
As to what they're feeding on, like there's a huge uh, bait supply around here that lives here in the winter, and what I'm catching on in the winter are jigs that are like that big too. So you got to imagine that they're just looking around for basically anything that'll pop up off the bottom, out of the mud or off of a piece of structure. Because I keep my bait traps out. I have a couple in a couple different places, and they stay full all throughout the winter. And I'm able to use some of that bait to catch perch and bass, which is pretty awesome. If they don't just know innately that there's plenty of fish to eat here, then they're learning it, and maybe entice. I don't know. That'll entice more fish to stay around every year. So from what I've seen, the holdover population has grown hugely, or I don't know. Maybe I got better at catching them. I used to just get skunked all the time, and now I catch more and more every year. So I don't know if the population's growing. I'm getting better, or what. Lord knows, man. It's fishing.
Yeah, right. No, and I mean that's the thing about it is like a lot of it is open to speculation, but it's all speculation based on what you're seeing out there and field experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I have my theories, and yeah, I don't know if they're right, but it's they're educated guesses, I guess.
You said your buddy caught a 40 pounder. So with the quality fish out there, whether they're holdover or migratory, what do you anticipate is going to change in the coming weeks based on what you've seen already this year and in years past?
I reckon that the surf bite won't be long lived, which is I've kind of been slacking on it, and like people are just cleaning up out there, and it's making me anxious that I'm missing it. But I'm still getting it done in the bays, which is cool. It's weird because even the weak fish are here early, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and it's not that early for weak fish.
That's early.
Yeah, yeah, okay, thanks. So I'm used to seeing them first week of May earliest. So to catch them, mid to late April, or yeah, I guess we're late April now, is weird to me. So moving forward, well, if I'm just considering years past and what moves I've made. So I start to see bigger bass coming in after that first wave of small fish, which, we just had some big fish, so maybe we'll get some huge fish next. But yeah, wishful thinking, right? Sun's getting stronger, water's getting warmer, so those fish are going to be more open to wandering the flats, I think, if they're not already doing it. So I'm going to be focusing my effort there. I think there'll be more hatches going on in May. So that makes even more sense to hit the flats then. Because you get like worm hatches, you get crab hatches, uh, and that's the fun stuff to catch on the flats. So bluefish just showed up this week, which is also like mind-bogglingly early to me. I'm used to them on second week of May, and I know folks out west will see them earlier than that. So Long Island sees them like first week of May, but guys on the east end, they're catching them right now, and they look pretty solid. So that seems to be early also. So um, everything feels early this year. One thing that I'm also pretty used to seeing uh, year in and year out is a move of big fish, big stripers during June. Um, so maybe that'll come in May. I think I'll probably be fishing very much around the moon phases during this May, just because everything seems early. I think big fish are going to be working those moon currents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's usually the way I kind of go about my fishing in June is, really focusing on the tides. And I'm still relatively new to surf casting and stuff like that, so it's a work in progress for me, but I really tend to focus my big fish fishing in June, and I haven't yielded such great results so far, but I would agree. It seems like despite the fact that we haven't had super warm temperatures this spring, everything is happening a little bit earlier. And I would say that that's almost reflective of what happened last year. Things showed up early, not ridiculously early, but I've seen, several sizable weak fish netted on party boats and stuff like that already down on the island. And I've mentioned this several times already in past videos, but Dustin Stevens, kayak angler from Rhode Island, got into 30 to 40 bluefish 2 or 3 weeks ago up on Rhode Island. But they're an interesting and mysterious fish. So they could, they're not the bass. We at least know a little bit about the bass's patterns and where they go to spawn. Bluefish are like a global mystery. They're weird fish.
Yeah. They might cross the ocean for all we know.
Exactly. Who knows? But in any event, yeah, I think that things are going to heat up. I think there's going to be bigger fish moving through, and I think a second wave of migratory fish of all classes is going to probably move through it, as well as stripers move out of those bigger rivers down south to Delaware and whatnot. So it's only going to get better, man.
So one thing I just remembered this, and it feels totally worth mentioning because this is also something that's kind of out of the ordinary for me. Is we've been getting more swells out of the east this year than I've ever seen before. And so what that means is when a swell comes from the east, it comes from the open ocean. So it way more water gets pushed up into the beach rather than like coming from overland, and like the wind and the swell doesn't travel for as long, so it doesn't really like grow.
Doesn't have the same momentum.
Yeah, exactly. So when swells and waves come from the east, they get big. And it's my understanding that when an east swell comes, we get a lot of really clear water, and that's because Gulf Stream water, I guess, is getting pushed in towards the shore. So that's just my explanation for why super clear water accompanies east swells. Another cool thing about the east swell is that pushing all that water up front, it makes the structure it it makes the structure just work so well. So if you have a good bowl and you have even more water being pushed into it, you're going to get a deeper bowl up front, and then you're going to get a stronger rip that pours out of there too. So the water's going to look amazing to you, and I think it seems to me like the fish are appreciating that this year. And it's all east water right now. I mean, give me a little taste of it.
Yeah. Give the audience a taste. The people need to see. Where's fishing every day? Spot burn.
So we're towards the top of the tide right now. Um, yeah, I don't know if you can really tell
No,
from
I can
this.
see it. I can actually see it really well. You're making me miss my home, man.
Yeah, there's some rain coming from those clouds. Some gannets out there right now. Here comes a cormorant at us. But yeah, the gannets have been out there all day, and I haven't seen them in a couple weeks. So it's I don't know, man. It's all kind of weird. It's a weird year, and seems to have a lot of potential. So I'm super excited for the coming month.
Tim, thanks a lot for joining us this week, man. It was a pleasure having you on, and hope you get on some bigger fish coming in the next couple weeks.
Thanks, buddy. It was a pleasure chatting with you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, likewise, man.
All right, Matt. Be well, man.
That's all the time we have for this week. Thanks again to Tim Regan for joining us to talk South Fork stripers down on Long Island. The first wave of larger migratory fish from the Chesapeake area, ranging from 15 to 20 pounds, have spread out across Long Island after remaining somewhat stagnant around New Jersey and western Long Island. The red-hot action seems to have died down a tad, as the first push of migratory bass disperses across much of the Northeast. As we head into May, the fishing in Long Island's back bays will continue to improve for striper fishermen, but don't be surprised if you catch a few bluefish or weak fish along the way. Slot-sized bass will slowly become more available in the surf and in the open water as the water warms throughout May. Speaking of May, Striper Cup is about to begin. If you haven't signed up for Striper Cup already, you can do so using the link below in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and check back in next week for more Striper season updates with On the Water.